Barack Obama is in the news because he's an egomaniac and a narcissist. He's never changed. Did great damage to this country. Great damage to the unity of this country, to race relations in this country, in my view. Did great damage to our relations with our allies. Did great damage to law enforcement, our military, which we're still trying to build up as a result of what he did, given what China's up to. I can't think of any areas. People have often said to me, well, can you think of one thing? No, I can't think of one thing he did that I agree with. Not one. So now he gets to pontificate about how horrible America is while he and the missus are collecting $100 million. I get so sick of this, you have no idea. So sick of it. Bernie Sanders with his 3 homes, with his Marxist propaganda. The media, they're all overpaid with their Marxist crap. I'm just sick of it. And so Obama's at Rice University's Baker Center. This would be James A. Baker, who is close to the Bush family, who was brought into the Reagan administration, but was always a rhino. And by the way, Karl Rove on TV trashed Ted Cruz just about 20 minutes ago. Guy's got no class. No class whatsoever. Mr. Architect, who lost the House and the Senate in 2006. Mr. Architect, whose candidate in 2000, came down to 300 votes, as I recall. Anyway, here's Obama. 8, go.
When I hear people say they don't like identity politics, they don't like... I think it's important to remember that identity politics doesn't just apply when it's black people or gay people or women.
No.
You know, the folks who really originated identity politics were the folks who said, 3/5 clause and all that stuff. That was identity politics.
Hold on. This guy's supposed to be a constitutional professor, or was, and he really wasn't. For the 400th time, the 3/5 clause in the Constitution was pushed by the northern states, the non-slave states. And the reason they did this was not because they believed that blacks were 3/5 of a person. 3/5 went to the representation in the House of Representatives. And they were struggling with this issue of slavery. The North rejected it. Certain states, particularly Georgia and South Carolina, were protecting it. And they said, okay, look, we want to resolve the House of Representatives issue here, so we're going to count your slaves as 3/5 of a vote for purposes of apportionment in the House of Representatives because you don't treat them as free people. In other words, the North wanted to reduce the power and the representation of the South in the House of Representatives. This idiot doesn't even know the history. And this is told day in and day out in public schools and colleges and universities in the country. Nobody studies this. It was the North trying to reduce the representation of the South in the House of Representatives. It was an initiative of the North. The free states. But what does that have to do with anything? 200 and some years ago. What does that have to do with anything? Have there been no changes since? This identity politics balkanizes the nation. Everybody's a victim. And then everybody has to out-victim everybody else. And then you're at loggerheads. And then you're at sword points. That's the problem with this. And he's the guy who brought all this back during his presidency. And by the way, Obama, the great politician who got elected president, really, I think any Democrat could have beaten McCain or Romney. I really do. They were horrible candidates. Terrible candidates. Go ahead.
That's still out there. Maybe that was a little too controversial for Houston, but
what the hell does that mean? And why is James Baker laughing? Go ahead.
Yeah, but Jim Crow was identity politics. That's where it started.
Jim Crow was identity politics. How about today, Mr. Former President? What about identity politics? If identity politics was wrong at the Constitutional Convention, if identity politics was wrong during Jim Crow, why do you embrace it? Why don't you embrace Martin Luther King instead and a colorblind society? That's the point, to treat people as individuals. And unfortunately, James A. Baker is just not up to the task. More when I return. Let's finish with Obama. There's the second cut of Obama today. Go ahead.
So part of what's happened is that when people feel their status is being jostled and threatened, they react. And what I would agree with is that the Washington consensus, whatever you want to call it, got a little too comfortable with, they're looking at GDP numbers and they're looking at, the internet, and everything's looking pretty great.
What the hell is he rambling on about? Almost sounds psycho to me. Go ahead.
Cold War, Jim, after what you guys engineered, you had this period of great smugness on the part of America and American elites, thinking, we got this all figured out.
I laugh when a leftist talks about American elites. You understand that's what they believe in. They camouflage their elitism, their iron-fisted centralization, in this notion of the people. Notion of the people. They want fewer and fewer people to make decisions about more and more of us. And then he talks about how the elites are smug. Well, who are the elites? Who runs Washington? Who's on CNN? Who's on MSNBC? The Washington Post? The various departments and agencies of the federal government? Who runs these things? The left. They created this massive Leviathan. Go ahead.
There were books coming out. That's the end of history. And
the end of history.
Yeah.
Francis Fukuyama.
It came back to bite us.
Gee whiz. Forget about the end of history. How about learning from history? How about learning from history, Mr. Obama, rather than cherry-picking and spinning history? Go ahead. Next one.
And by the way, American energy production, you wouldn't always know it, but it went up every year I was president. And that whole.
Let's just stop that. Now listen to what a lie that is. So energy production went up every year he was president. Maybe that's true, but it had nothing to do with him. How could it have anything to do with him? He was at war with fossil fuels. He was at war with coal. He was at war with electricity. His EPA was unleashed, regulation after regulation. You can build that electricity plant, but you'll bankrupt yourself. Remember all that? So if it went up in spite of Obama and in spite of his policies. That's called capitalism, ladies and gentlemen. This guy is so delusional. It's really pathetic. Go ahead.
The biggest oil producer and the biggest guy. That was me, people. I just want you to.
Oh, my Lord. This guy is. Wants it both ways, right? We're all supposed to wear propellers on our head. But on the other hand, all this great oil production and so forth, it's thanks to him. He's such a liar. May I call him a liar? I think I'll call him a liar. Go ahead.
So
then you got the clapping seal. This is the James A. Baker Center. Why is there a James A. Baker Center anyway? Was he president of the United States? No. And why would they invite this guy? They can't do better than this? Go ahead.
It's a little like, sometimes you go to Wall Street and folks will be grumbling about.
All right, hold on a second. If Trump had said something like this, they'd be all over him, wouldn't they? If Trump praised himself, which he does from time to time, and so what? That's what successful people do. They'd be all over him. I can hear Jake Tapper now. Line number 7. I can hear Wolf Blitzer now. But But Obama says that they sit there starry-eyed, their tongue hanging out of their mouth, spittle dripping on their loafers. He's unbelievable. He's unbelievable. Look at the great things he did, ladies and gentlemen. Through massive taxation and regulation, he created enormous wealth in this country. Our economy is bustling thanks to him. Through massive regulation of the oil industry, we now have more oil. Unbelievable. Go ahead.
Have you checked where your stocks were when I came in office and where they are now? What are you talking? What are you complaining about? Just say thank you, please.
Oh, shut up. It's not funny at all. It's so stupid. Thank you, please. And let's talk about health care. That was your marquee issue. Let's talk about that. Tell us, what was the cost of your insurance before Obama was president? What was your deductible before Obama was president? How much paperwork did you have to do before Obama was president? How many sign-offs did you have to have before Obama was president? It's a clown act, in my humble opinion. Doesn't know history, spins things together. He is the gift of gab. That's what he has. It's like this guy, Robert Francis O'Rourke. You can call me Beto. Well, why would I call you Beto? Your name is Robert Francis O'Rourke. Well, you know, when I was a little kid, they used to call me Beto. No, call him Beto so he can try and confuse Latino voters that he is part of that identity politics. It's all about identity politics. Well, you know, the 3/5 thing in the Constitution there, that was identity politics. Not a serious man. Did I tell that story I asked you before, Mr. B, about meeting Joe Biden in the Amtrak train? So my wife Julie and I are on the Amtrak train heading toward New York for this Radio Hall of Fame event. And sitting there minding my own business. And we're faced forward, of course. And in comes Joe Biden and Dr. Jill Biden. Don't call her Mrs. She gets very angry. Doctor. And they walk past us. I have my baseball cap down. I don't really want to be noticed or get involved. I don't know if he knows me or not. But anyway, sit toward the back. And I believe she gets off earlier, I think at Wilmington. So I have to use the train bathroom, you know. So I get up and I have to get up and head toward the back, and there's Joe Biden. And I was very polite, Mr. Producer. And I put out my hand, shook his hand, and I said, you know, we don't always agree. He said, that's a good thing. And he said, and you're a smartass, I know. I thought, gee, so why is he so hostile to me? So at that point, I realized he knew who I was. I've only spent, 15 years mocking him, Mr. Producer? So I said, Mr. Biden, all I wanted to tell you is you don't travel with security, and that's a very bad idea. That's all. And he said, and I hope I'm wrong, by the way. I hope they're there, but I didn't see a lot. And there's a lot of nuts out there. Anyway, and so I begin to leave, and he says to me, he says, well, thanks for coming by and saying hello. That was it. That was it. He was like ready to pounce. No, just saying hello. How old is he? 74? The Democrats are really, they got quite the farm team. You got Bernie Sanders, who's 78, 76? He's running for president. Biden, I'm sure, he's 74. You got Nancy Pelosi. What is she, 112? Doesn't look a day over 111. But I don't know. And, of course, they know what all the millennials think and so forth. And I love it. Joe Biden is now considered a moderate. A moderate. And he's considered a nice guy. The guy who smeared Bork, who smeared Clarence Thomas, who smeared numerous people. That lunch bucket Joe, he's a great guy. He's never had a lunch bucket in his life. He went from law school to the Wilmington City Council to the United States Senate to vice president. That's it. Much like Schumer. Schumer gets out of law school. He's elected to the state assembly in New York. Then he runs for Congress and wins. Now he's a senator. No real world experience whatsoever. Most of these people don't have it. Trump does, and they hate him. All right, I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Obama wants to create a cult of personality around himself. That's what he wants to do. It's really unfortunate. Can you imagine if the first black president of the United States had been a unifying figure? Had been a fairly moderate Democrat? Had embraced all segments of society? Wow, what a historic figure he would be. I mean, historic beyond his race. What a historic figure he would be. I'm quite serious about this. Rather than being a radical leftist, rather than dividing the country along racial lines, rather than trashing law enforcement, rather than trashing our allies, rather than undermining our military, rather than destroying our immigration laws, I mean, seriously. Can you imagine what a historic figure he would really be from a substantive point of view? The way I look at it, he really blew it. He really blew it.